Hello everyone and welcome to week 8. Today we're going to talk about prevention, specifically delinquency prevention. Now, one of the objectives for the modules this week is to talk about the role of police. Of course, I covered that last week, and part of that is there's just so much packed into this module, I wanted to split it up a little bit. And so this topic does cover all of the performance objectives in the class, and we're really going to be focusing on some of the models used for delinquency prevention, the aspect of fragmentation, and kind of juvenile rights and how that fits into the picture. And then we're going to talk about some of the trends that we are seeing, and so I'll explain what those factors mean. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about what works and what doesn't work. All right, as far as the future of juvenile justice goes, you know, nobody's got a crystal ball. I don't know. When we look at it from a historical perspective, we do see that pendulum waving. We see it going back and forth, and we shift between the two different models. We shift all the way to the medical model, which basically looks at juvenile delinquency as an illness and what can we do to treat that illness and what can we do to prevent that illness. And then we see it completely shift the other way to focusing on punishment, and the idea that the only way we're going to deter is to provide some harsh consequences and make it hurt, really, not physically hurt, but provide consequences in the form of punishment. And we see it swinging back and forth and back and forth, and ultimately, in my opinion, the best plan is something right down the middle. We need to incorporate both models in my perspective. One of the other things that makes the future difficult to determine is this concept of fragmentation. And we really don't have a clear focus on what the juvenile justice system should look like. We also see great differentiation between states as far as the legislation as it pertains to juvenile crime and policies and procedures. We see differences in how judges believe juveniles should be responded to. We see differences in correctional programs. So all three aspects of the criminal justice system are fragmented from state to state, even from within states, and so that makes it very challenging. We also know that juvenile rights. Now, we've talked about the court cases of Inri Galt and Kent versus the United States. Both of those dealt with due process, and we see benefits and drawbacks in that we want to provide a separate system that deals with juveniles differently, yet we want to incorporate some of the adult criminal justice system aspects. We want to make sure we are treating juveniles fairly and with due process. Yet, when do we cross the line of being too much like the adult system and have no need for the adult system? That's something we'll talk about in future weeks as well. All right, some of the trends that we're seeing right now is really trying to prevent, and ultimately that's the primary trend that we're seeing. And we're really working at trying to identify the underlying problems that lead to delinquency, keeping in mind that sometimes our awareness of these problems is in hindsight. And when we're looking back at what happened, we always have 20/20 vision. There's so many times we're like, oh, we should have seen that coming. But we're also not, you know, as I've said before, just because the child is abused doesn't mean they're going to become delinquent. And, you know, I have a picture of a fence or an ambulance, and ultimately the example I like to use here is, so let's say, you know, you're standing on the cliff and the view is absolutely beautiful, but you know the closer you're going to get to the edge of that cliff, the more beauty you're going to see. But when you get close to that edge, there's also the danger of falling down. So do we need to build a fence to prevent you from falling down, or should we just have an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff? You tell me, what is going to be most effective? Preventing juvenile crime is ultimately the leading trend. And we know prevention comes at 3 different levels. Primary prevention is for everyone. There's no risk factors. It's basically trying to provide tools for everyone. DARE, Drug Abuse Resistance Education, is probably the best example of primary prevention. Secondary prevention is for kids that have some type of risk factor. It might be something that their parents have done, or it might be where they live. But ultimately, secondary prevention is we've identified some type of risk factor. And so now we have programs geared towards those kids. Now, as I said last week, gang resistance education, the GREAT program. You know, my kids go to a small Catholic school. We don't have gangs or very few gangs in our area. Yes, there are gangs in St. Cloud. Don't get me wrong. There are definitely gang members in St. Cloud, but not to the point that all of the schools need the GREAT program. And so secondary prevention programs are for kids that have already demonstrated some type of risk factor. Tertiary prevention programs are for kids that we've missed. They have entered the juvenile justice system, and so tertiary prevention really focuses on what can we do to prevent them from further delinquency. And so we're really trying to focus on reducing recidivism rates in tertiary prevention. No matter what level of prevention, all of them are really taking into consideration that sociological criminology, in that what are the risk factors, what's going on in their social environment that is malleable, is something that we can manipulate. And ultimately, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention has been very active in helping us do that. And ultimately, when we're talking about protective and risk factors, what the OJJDP says is that we need to really focus on the protective factors that are going to offset some of those risk factors. One of the programs that they have is called Strengthening Americans' Families. And really, this is very much, it's self-explanatory, but it's really focusing on the families and helping those families become more functional, providing them the skills that they need to be better at being a family. And that can be a wide variety of things, from parenting classes to helping with poverty, or maybe getting some social service involvement, or involvement in an after-school activity so their kids aren't left at home but is still affordable. And ultimately, these types of programs try to reduce the risk by increasing the protective factors, the things that we know that insulate and buffer us from delinquency. How can we promote that? And ultimately, that's going to be reducing some of the risk factors. Now, the OJJDP developed what they call Blueprints for Violence Prevention, or BVPs, if you remember back to that initial slide. And ultimately, what this is really doing is, again, we see lots of fragmentation where one jurisdiction might be doing this. Well, they might be having great success with that, but the jurisdiction over here is having a similar problem, but doesn't know that these people over here is doing that, because there's so much fragmentation, especially when it's from state to state. So what the OJJDP did was, several years ago, they put a call out and said, if you're doing something that you think works, let us know about it. And then they had several criteria that they looked at. So you might think your program works, but based on this criteria, do we agree that it works? And ultimately, the underlying assumption is, let's share. If you've got something that works and we have a similar problem and have similar demographics, it might work here too. So what the OJJDP did when they put that call out, they had over 500 programs submitted saying, we think we're doing something really cool. And of those 500 programs, 11 were deemed effective. Now, again, the OJJDP put them on very, very strict criteria. 11 of them were found as effective. 19 more were listed as promising, meaning that you've met several of the criteria. There's just a couple areas that we would like to see you tweak before we're going to recommend that others copy this program. Of those 11, 4 of them focused on the family, and that coincides with their program of Strengthening American Family. Again, we know when we're talking about that radio concept, the most influential aspect of a child's life is their family. So I want to spend some time talking about some of these programs that were deemed effective. The first is prenatal and infancy home visit by nurses. Now, I've actually had students through the years tell me that they qualified for this program. So again, there's risk factors. Sometimes it's poverty, sometimes it's age. They're young mothers. There's a few other things that might be identified as someone who might benefit from help. Again, children are born, they don't come with a manual. Parenting is hard, and some folks just simply lack the skills, whether it be based on their age or maybe their experience growing up. We've identified them, and so what they do is they have nurses, pediatric nurses, come to their home and help them, teach them parenting skills, teach them how to take care of their babies. We even sometimes do it prenatally. We also focus on what are mom's goals. Now, we know, not that we're excluding dads, but we know moms are the primary caregiver. You know, one of the risk factors might be that mom might not have a high school education or mom might not have a job. So how can we help mom get connected with resources while also being a mom? We know that a lot of times these challenges are cyclical. You know, mom's mom was a teenage mom, didn't have a job, never got her GED, and grandma, you know, didn't have a GED, excuse me. And so we know this is cyclical, and these types of programs really focus on breaking that cycle. Ultimately, these programs are considered very effective, and by age 4, we believe we've recouped the costs of these programs. The PAST programs, Promoting Alternative Thinking Strategies, is geared towards kindergarten through 5th grade and really teaches them kind of life skills that they may not have gotten at home. And so they're going to give it in school, and really building on this idea of that if you believe that if you see success, you will become successful. So teaching kids about self-control and problem-solving skills and healthy self-esteem, and helping them understand their feelings so they can then control their emotions because they can identify their emotions. One of the things that I still think is absolutely fascinating, and as a mother of just boys, this really hits home to me, most boys confuse the feelings of sad and mad. Now stop and think about that. If I think sad and mad, my response is the same thing. Think how damaging that can be. And so one of the things about paths is helping kids understand the differences between their feelings, because ultimately if we understand the difference, saying, you know, oh, this happened and I'm really mad. And I've even had this in my own home going, are you mad? Or did that just really make you sad? Well, same thing. No, not the same thing. And so helping them work through that and understand what that difference is. The OAS program is a bully prevention program that I absolutely love. So some of you, I might have recommended this program for your project. It actually originated in Norway after a very, very tragic event that was basically originated in bullying. And basically this program focuses on the school and provides the school with a toolbox that help them reduce the opportunity for bullying, and any reward where students feel that, you know, bullying, that they've achieved something, how can we help reduce that? And ultimately it really focuses on accountability, helping the schools be more accountable for bullying that's happening in the school, down to the individual classroom or to the classroom and bullying that might be happening in the classroom, and then the individual. It gives them the tools to help kids understand their role in bullying. And so it's really a great program that I believe very strongly in. Life skills training is basically a drug prevention program that is more reality-based. Now, DARE is a great program still used in many, many schools, and DARE has since then been revised to really incorporate a lot of these pieces. Life skills training is more reality-based and really came to fruition when DARE was being challenged. And that life skills incorporates not only drug education, but focuses on helping kids with problem solving, stress management, and then information about drugs. And of course, we know the DARE program has since been revised to include those aspects as well. Mentoring programs, mainly here we're talking about big brothers and big sisters, where it's a secondary prevention, where these kids are showing some type of risk factor. We call them disadvantaged. A lot of times they are from single-parent homes. And ultimately, mentoring provides a great role model. The traditional approach was that, this role model is going to spend, 2 days a month or whatever it is, however many set hours. And what they're finding was they had very much a lack of mentors because people couldn't commit to those hours, those times, and those types of things. And so the new approach is, can we have mentors come into the school or help with in after-school activities? And so it's basically an attempt at getting more mentors, because basically we have lots and lots of kids sign up asking for mentors through the Big Brothers Big Sister programs. We don't have enough bigs, and so I would encourage you to consider being a big brother or big sister. It's a great program. I was involved with it for several years and still a huge supporter of the program. I haven't been able to be a big for a few years now, but I would really encourage you to consider it. No matter what the program, the OJJDP says if you want to be effective, you really need to have 6 guiding principles in your program. The first is to support the family. Again, we know that radio concept. We know they're really important. Supporting schools and other organizations. These folks are working fast and furious and hard to help kids to prevent delinquency, and so should we. Promoting prevention strategies. We've identified what works, and so we need to promote that. Intervene immediately. When we see a situation or become aware of a situation, we need to act on it. We don't, sometimes the intervention can vary, but we really need to, take action, not just wait and see what happens. Using graduated sanctions, we'll talk about this more in coming weeks, but ultimately the least restrictive first. Just because a kid is truant, we don't want to lock them up. We need to use graduated sanctions, starting with the least restrictive option first. We need to focus on what's called the 8% problem. Now, I've referred to this before, but we know that 60% of juvenile crime is committed by 8% of juveniles. And so how can we identify that 8% and deal with that 8%? Because ultimately, we know that represents the vast majority of the delinquency. Now, we talked about blueprints for violence prevention. We also know that there are treatment blueprints. So these are our programs for folks who are already in the system. One of those programs is known as multidimensional treatment foster care. So kids who have been taken out of the home, these are specific foster care families that have received specific training on how to manage these kids. Now, these kids are very, very at risk. We put them into foster care in these specific programs these specific families that have received specific training, and basically the kids move through 3 different levels while they are in these foster families. The first level is very, very restrictive. Basically, there's adult supervision all the time. We then move to the next level if they can effectively manage with that. We move to the next level, which gives them some free time. A lot of it is still supervised, providing them some free time. Then we move to allowing them some peer-to-peer interaction. May or may not be supervised, or levels of supervision might vary. So again, this particular program is for kids that are having some really, really significant issues. We also have what's known as functional family therapy. Now, this has been recently revised as well, but basically this is an attempt when we have kids who are at risk and their family is struggling. This particular program works with the youth as well as their family, so we need family buy-in. But basically it's going to look at some of the behaviors that are not appropriate, and then we have plans for change, and we take baby steps, and then to be able to function within the family. And then generalization is, how can we extend that to their interactions outside of their family? So the first phase is called engagement and motivation, and this is really helping that family start to communicate again, where in these particular families, there's so much negativity. Basically, communication has shut down. The family doesn't know what to do. And so what this first phase does is really try to bring them together and get all of the trash, all of the baggage out there, and try to turn that around. Start spinning is what I like to refer to it as. We move into phase 2 then, and once we know what all that underlying baggage is, what can we do to change it? And we are going to develop a plan that takes baby steps to make those changes. When this happens, we're going to do this. And really help them be a family, help them communicate again and parent again. Or sometimes they never were communicating, or their communication was very ineffective. How can we fix that? Once we've established phase 2, now phase 2 takes a long time. But once we've successfully handled phase 2, we move to phase 3, where how now can we make this or apply these skills to the outside world? And how can we connect you with community resources? Because me as your facilitator, I can't be here all the time. I need to cut those cords and help you become self-sufficient, still using these skills, but where or what in the community can we connect you with to help you continue what you've learned in this very, very safe environment. Another program that I really like is multi-systemic therapy. I might have recommended this as a program for you as well. What I like about MST is that it takes this whole social network of youth, understanding that a youth's interaction with others is what influences their behavior. So we take into consideration the parents and really focuses on educating the parents on how to be better parents. We take a look at their relationships and what are positive relationships and what are negative relationships, and how can we help guide those to be more positive. What's cool about MST is that it heavily involves the family. Now that's not for everyone. Some families are so dysfunctional this is just not an appropriate program, because the parents need to focus on their own issues first before they can be good parents. But what I really like about this program for families that are able, we developed the program with the family. Mom, dad, siblings are all involved in saying, how can we be better? And so I really, really like MST. One of my local programs, of course, I'm from Minnesota, I'm a little bit biased. We have a program called Delinquents Under 10. Now, first and foremost, please know that delinquency for juveniles who are less than 10 years old is very, very rare. But the kids that are very, very high risk. We've already talked about that. Kids who start young are extremely high risk. So we want to zoom in, we want to swarm in, and we want to provide this, what we call wraparound network. We want to give them a big old hug of services. We want to hit every aspect of their life, and so we have a whole team that comes in and basically provides services for the child and the family. However, in that team, there's going to be one primary person, because if you have to be answering to all these individuals, it gets very overwhelming. And so there's one key person that kind of manages all of those service team, but it really focuses on these youth. What I think is also really cool is they have a corporate sponsor that provides services as well as incentives. For example, for this program, One Year Target company was the corporate sponsor, and they provide funding for rewards. And so kids that were doing well in the program got rewarded. Their family got Twins tickets was one of the things, Timberwolves tickets, Minnesota Wild tickets, going to the zoo, rewards to work towards by doing what they needed to do, you know, to reduce these risk factors. Bottom line, best practices, unsuccessful programs, focus just on the behavior. If we just focus on behavior, we're not going to get anywhere. We need to really focus on some of the underlying factors that are leading to those behaviors. And if we just deal with misbehaving and punishments for misbehaving, we're not going to get anywhere. Successful programs really are wraparound services that really promote the development of both the child as well as their family. There was a study done a few years back called Getting Your Money's Worth. And ultimately what really they talked about is programs that work and programs that don't work. Now I've already talked about programs that work. They found what doesn't work, and one of the things I work with students all quarter long. You may have already gotten feedback from me on your assignments thus far. Programs such as gun buyback programs don't work. They just go find a different gun. They take your money for buying that gun back, and they just go steal another gun. So you're just basically giving the kid money. Programs like boot camps. Boot camps have been repeatedly demonstrated to be ineffective. Military-style boot camps are absolutely ineffective at reducing delinquency. That's why most of these programs have been reworked to be challenge incarceration programs, more like a wilderness-based program. Programs such as Scared Straight have been shown to be ineffective. And so we have to look at research. You might have your own opinion, but unfortunately your opinion might be based on faulty research, or saying, I have one of my older brothers firmly believes if he hadn't gone to the Army, he would be in prison. But that's going to the military. That's different. Boot camps for kids who aren't in the military are what are deemed ineffective. What programs that do work are when we focus on the family and those bonds within our community, and really helping to teach values. Again, because that's not just automatic, and sometimes the family is teaching negative values. And really what we're trying to do is that social control theory. Remember, there's the 4 aspects of Travis Hershey's social control that a good program is going to incorporate those 4 elements of Travis Hershey's social control theory. All right, as far as the assignments go this week, please read Chapter 10 as well as the links under the Lesson tab. Your writing assignment is going to focus on prevention programs. Now, what I'm requiring, and again, make sure you read the announcements, you need to look at 2 different programs. So what you need to do is provide a summary of each program, identify the target audience and the facilitators of each program, identify the levels of prevention, so incorporate what we've been reading about and what I've been talking about. What level of prevention is each of your program? And then also incorporate how that program incorporates risks, needs, and responsivity. Those are all things that are talked about in your reading, and so you need to incorporate what you're learning about to this specific program. The discussion forum this week is pretty straightforward. When we talk about crime prevention or delinquency prevention and delinquency control, you need to identify the difference and then incorporate your opinion, what is more effective, prevention or control, and then support your opinion as far as why. That's all I have for you. Have a great week.